AP, hope you guys are doing super duper this fabulous Monday. We are going to start in on reviewing Unit 2, which is Caesar's Book 1 and Book 6. Okay? And this will probably be as far as we get, is reviewing this section of Caesar. John, obviously, you'll need to do units 3 and 4 as well. So that would be Virgil book 2 and then Caesar book 4. So John, you'll be for the AP test, you'll need you to make sure that you're well versed on units 1 through 4. Okay. Also, John, I would encourage, I think, reviewing the introductions and such on these books. I think that would probably be helpful if you get a chance to do that. That would be good. Also, just want to make you aware, there are some review videos on YouTube as well from the AP site. If you're interested, those are available. All right. So we're gonna start in here. We're doing book 1, sections 1 through 3 today, and again, just kind of going over some highlights on here because we've already translated it. So I hope you have reviewed the translation, but yeah. So Caesar's work here is in the genre of commentary, which it's kind of a very interesting sort of style because it's not a history per se, but they're kind of almost like dispatches from the front lines that are being sent back home, and they're meant for a wide distribution. So it's not just like a letter being sent to one person. So it's a rather interesting sort of thing, and Caesar, as you know, puts himself in the third person, and tries to give a very objective sort of style to his writing, even though of course he is constantly trying to make himself look really good, and calm and in control at all times. So it's a very interesting style. So book 1, section 1 here, starts off with that famous Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres. All Gaul is divided into 3 parts. So we get a look at the geographical divisions of Gaul and the region that Caesar is going to be in the next about 8 years. And just so you know too, like the various books of De Bello Gallico, each book is basically 1 year of the campaign season, more or less. So that's kind of how the books are kind of laid out. All right, and we get these 3 groups. You get the Belgae, the Aquitani, and then the Galli or the Celtae, depending on if you use the Roman name or their own name. Okay, and then we find out that they're all different in their language, their institutions, and their laws. Okay, so each one of them is different. Get some ablatives of respect there, as well as some asyndeton as well, so lack of conjunctions. And then he talks about some of the geographical divisions. We've got the Garumna River and the Matrona River that divide these various tribes. And then we have this really interesting section from line 7 to I guess it's line 14, where we find out he describes the Belgae as being the strongest or the bravest, and part of the reason is because they're so far away from the province, and some of these things that Caesar views as being sort of weakening influences, such as continual trade with the merchants, and then buying things that lead to a weakness Spirit. Plus, the Belgae are also, constantly battling, particularly with the Germans, who are considered a very, for the most part, a very fierce group. All right. And then he talks also about the Helvetians excelling in virtue, another ablative of respect or in courage, because they also are very warlike and fighting with Germans as well. And John, just to give you a little picture, I know I went over this before, but the practice practice test they have, one of the sections they give you is this part from 1.1 here, and the questions they ask, just so you can get a feel for what they're going to be asking, the type of questions. So, for example, in this it's line 2, but in your text it's line. Let me see here. Hold on. Apologize. Yeah, I guess it is line 2. Tertium, so this is referring back to at the very beginning, is a direct object of which verb, and then write your answer in Latin. Okay, so you'd say it would be the direct object of incolunt. Okay. And then they say, number 2, the second question, identify one and only one respect in which, according to lines 2 to 3, the Gallic tribes differed from one another. So that's the lingua, institutis, and legibus. So you could say in language or in institutions. Okay, but there, of course, they want only one. Then they say the next question, translate in context horum omnium fortissimi. So that would be the bravest of all these, or the strongest of all these, and then identify the degree of fortissimi, which would be superlative, of course. Okay. Number 4, the fourth question, what does Caesar imply is the effect of provincial cultus and humanitas on the Gallic tribes? Okay. And that's where you get the that it has a weakening effect on their spirits and kind of making them more effeminate, I guess is the word they use. All right. Number 5, named. Then this is a bit of geography for you for the Roman world. Name the seaport at the mouth of the Tiber through which ancient mercatores transported goods to Rome. And this one may remember from your Latin 2 days in the geography for National Latin exam, but the seaport at the mouth of the Tiber was Ostia, and that's where the Romans that was the port town for Rome. All right, and then they ask, here's a grammar one, what is the antecedent of quibus, which would be on, for this it's line 7, let me see here where it would be in your text. I guess it would be line 11 in your text. Okay, so what's the antecedent of that? It would be the Germanis. All right. So that's the type of questions they're asking here for the Caesar passage. Okay. Now the remainder of the first section, we get some more geography, telling about some of the boundaries and so forth of the various people groups, and quite exciting stuff. So you get one group that's bounded by the ocean, and then we have various rivers and all that sort of thing. Okay. Book 1, section 2. This is where we first meet our old friend Orgetorix. Okay, and Orgetorix is going to be important here in the outset of things, although he does die early on. And Orgetorix basically inspires his Helvetian peoples to migrate out of their homeland, and kind of thus encouraging Caesar's hand in coming to the proverbial rescue. All right. So we learn about Argetorix. He's very noble and very wealthy among his people. Then, let's see here, line 2. You'll notice here how Romans do dates when something happened. It says, with Marcus Messala and Marcus Pupius Piso being consuls, so this is called consular dating. So this is kind of a very common way of reckoning when something happened, is who were the consuls during that year. Okay, remember there are 2 consuls at one time. Okay, and that would be a nice ablative time when. Okay, induced by a desire for the rule. So objective genitive there with the regni. Okay, and then he persuaded his state, and he kind of butters them up a little bit and says, hey guys, since you guys excel all in virtue, all right, it would be very easy for you to take power, to take control. All right, so he kind of plays on that sense of national pride that they would likely have. Okay, and then he talks about some of their boundaries, and particularly that the Helvetians did not have a lot of room in their land. So they've got the Rhine River on one side, they've got the Germans on another side, and they've got the Jura Mountains, and they've got Lake Lemanus, or Lake Geneva nowadays, and the Rhone River. So he's basically saying, hey guys, we don't have a lot of room here in our land, and he is able to encourage those of fighting spirit, that hey, we need to get a move on here, and we don't want to be a people that is just content with the bare minimum and the status quo. Okay, and people that are going to have more room to wander, and to they're going to be able better to, if they have more supplies, they'll be able better to defend themselves. So all right, and then he actually tells the size of the Helvetian land, 240 miles and 180 miles in breadth. All right. So some good grammar stuff too going on that last page 11. You've got that result clause. So as a result of these factors, or by means of these things, it happened that they wandered less widely. Then you also have Belandi, which is a genitive gerund. All right. Actually, sorry. Apologize. No, it is genitive gerund. Yeah, I apologize. Okay. And then 1.3, this is where we start getting some more action going on with Orgetorix, and they make a plan for how to proceed. We've got line 2. You've got that gerund to show purpose. You also have line 2. You've got that relative clause of characteristic as well, with that qui to perternerent. All right. So a couple of things they decide to do. They decide to acquire the things that they're going to need for setting out. They buy up as many carts and pack animals as they can. They sow as much in the crops as they possibly can. And then they make peace and friendship with their fellow tribes, which is a really interesting thing, particularly if they're as Caesar portrays them being rather ominous. So that's kind of an interesting little detail to make, that Caesar, portrays it as being something ominous, but they're also making peace with their fellow tribes. So that's rather odd. All right. And then they kind of set a date or a general time, basically 2 years, and then on the third year they will set out. And Orgetorix is taking the lead on all of these things. It says also that he began an embassy to the states, undertook that for himself. So he's taking a lot of responsibility, and then he persuades some other guys, and this is where we get some of our favorite names here. Casticus, the son of Catamantaloidus, fabulous name. And then he also, oh yeah, and it talks a little bit about his father being a friend of the Roman people, which was kind of an honorific title, but at the same time, he's not actually a Roman. All right, so he did not have the same rights and everything as an actual Roman. All right, and then we've got Dumnorix as well. He also persuades Dumnorix to get involved, and he Orgetorix gives his daughter to Dumnorix as well to in marriage, which was a common way of kind of cementing alliances, was by marriage. So, and you see that actually all the way up till almost to modern times. You've got kings and queens marrying royal families, and all actually throughout history. So it's a gone on for thousands of years, really. And Caesar himself, they've got a note on here. Caesar himself, married his own daughter to Pompey, in that the so-called first triumvirate with Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. So it's even though the Romans did that quite a bit as well. Okay, so lots of fun grammar things going on. Again, I didn't have the kind of a form, like a little quiz for you this time around, because I wanted to do a little bit of site translation as well. So I'm sorry, probably a little bit extra work than normal, but if we can take a look at that site translation, if you haven't done that, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and do that. But if you have, let's take a look at your site translation. And John, once again, you will have a site translation from Virgil, and I believe you're going to be answering questions on that as well. I don't think you're going to have to submit an actual written translation. I think it's just going to be like a short answer sort of thing. But let's look at this little translation. This is from Virgil. This is from his book, the Georgics. And Virgil has three main works: the Eclogues, which was his first one, which is a collection of pastoral poems. They are written in dactylic hexameter, but pastoral poems are kind of set off in the country with with shepherds and very lovely scenery and everything. But at the same time, as typical with Virgil, it's never just about kind of escapism. There's always a little bit of something underneath the surface, like the very first of the eclogues. Two of the guys are kind of discussing some of the difficulties. Like one of them's basically been driven off his land because of like soldiers getting like repossessing the land coming back from war. So there's always like this kind of sad undertone to it. And then the Georgics, this is what's called a didactic poem. So didactic basically just means meant to teach a lesson. And it's ostensibly on farming. Okay, so it has lots of different farming techniques and stuff, but of course with Virgil it's never just that, and he weaves in a lot of other mythology and lots of other stories, and this is from the last part. The one that I've included here is from near the end of the Georgics, book 4, and in that book 4 he has a famous account of Orpheus and Eurydice, and Orpheus and Eurydice is it's popular myth. It's also the subject of a lot of artwork and a lot of music. There's a really popular opera, for those of you into opera. It's got some beautiful, beautiful music in it, but by a guy named Gluck. But there are many others as well. But anyway, so let's take a look at this translation here. Yamque would be like and now, bearing back or carrying back his foot. He had escaped all misfortunes. Okay, and this is talking about Orpheus here. So Orpheus was a kind of a master musician, and he had descended into the underworld to bring back his love, Eurydice, who had died by a poisonous snake bite, and he had gotten leave from Proserpina to take his love back, on the condition that he did not look behind him, did not look back as he was heading back to the upper world. All right. Okay. So, and now, bearing back his foot, he had escaped all misfortunes. And then you've got this ablative absolute with Eurydice having been returned. He was coming to the upper airs, okay, to the upper breezes. And then sequens pone, so following behind. This would be Eurydice here. Okay, let's see here. Actually, I apologize. I think that first bit may not have been a ablative absolute. I'm sorry. I think that might have just been and Eurydice having been returned was coming to the upper breezes. Sorry about that. And looking behind, indeed, following behind, indeed, Proserpina had given this law. Okay, so Proserpina, remember, is the goddess of the underworld, and she had been abducted by Pluto, and she was now the queen of the underworld. And remember, there's that famous myth about her and her mother Ceres, who we learned about in Virgil earlier as well. When she, with Ceres mourning, is why we have winter, and then Proserpina returns to the upper world for a time, and we have spring and summer. Okay, anyway. So, indeed, Proserpina had given or had granted this law, when a sudden insanity, the subita dementa, a sudden insanity seized that's the capit or seized or took, the incautious, the careless lover. All right. Indeed, worthy to be overlooked or worthy to be forgiven, okay, or basically forgivable. Ignoscendo would be a gerundive there, modifying the dementia. Okay, so his insanity, it was a very forgivable sort of offense. If the manes, the spirits of the dead, should know, and then kind of understood how to forgive or how to overlook. Okay, so if the dead could overlook something like this, if they knew how to, this would have been a very overlookable offense. I don't know if overlookable is a word. It should be. All right, so if the spirits of the dead were knowing how to overlook, or should know how to overlook. Okay, so he stood fast. The restitit. He stood fast, and forgetful, alas, that immemor who. So forgetful, alas, and conquered of spirit. So I think that has to do with he basically had lost his wits. He looked back at his own Eurydice now under the light itself. So they had basically gotten back. They had almost gotten basically to the threshold of the upper world. And he looked back. There, all his labor, all his work was poured out, and the treaties, the agreements of the cruel or the pitiless tyrant were broken. All right, there's the rupta. And 3 times the sound of breaking, fragor, breaking, was heard in the pools of Avernus, or in the, I guess it would be in the Avernian pools. Okay, and Avernus was a lake, or excuse me, was a. Here it's talking about a lake, but Avernus was considered basically the entrance to the underworld. Okay, so that's what that is in the Avernian pools. All right, so there's a little site translation there for you. So again, John, once again, you're probably not going to have to write out a translation, but you very well may need to answer questions and stuff. So, for example, they might ask you something like, who was the god of the Avernus, or something like that, or of the underworld, or who is the main subject of this passage, or something like that, being Orpheus. So, all right. Hope you guys have a fabulous day. I apologize again. I'm kind of rambling a bit, so I'm going to sign off here. I love you guys, and for tomorrow we will do book 1, 4 through 7 of Caesar. Okay, so we'll do book 1, 4 through 7 for review tomorrow. Okay, love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.